Hi, my name is Rick Russell, and I'll be your guide through this four-wheel drive basics and safety video. This video represents a combination of my research into other training programs throughout the United States and over 20 years of on-the-ground experience. We tape most of this video here at the Hummer off-road course in South Bend, Indiana, and maybe after we're finished I'll get a chance to try one of those puppies out. During the video, we'll move back and forth between the classroom and the off-road course. So let's go on up to the classroom and get started. I've divided our topic into two separate sections. During the first section, we're going to stop and take a look at two-wheel drive components, four-wheel drive components, tire pressure, and why it's important to anyone who goes off the highway. We'll look at some driving techniques, uphills, downhills, and then we'll finish the first section by looking at negotiating different kinds of terrains, rock, sand, mud, and that'll complete the first section. In the second section of our video, we'll review the guidelines to four-wheeling, getting unstuck, some basic winching techniques, trail repairs, and what to do if you get lost or stranded, in the backcountry that is. What to carry in your four-wheel drive is also important in preparing for that trip, which we'll discuss. Upgrading your 4x4, at least with some basic upgrades to help you out in the backcountry. And we'll conclude the first section with some trail ethics. So we've got a lot to cover, so let's get on with the two-wheel drive components. The motor is connected to a transmission, then the power transfers down the drive shaft to the rear differential, out to the rear axles, and on out to the rear wheels. The rear differential is an important ingredient in off-highway travel, so it's important to stop and take a little harder look at that rear differential. In a standard vehicle, whether it be two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, the rear differential has spider gears in it. Those spider gears allow one of the wheels to turn at a different speed than the other wheel when you're going around a corner. And this illustration will probably show you the best way to understand how this works. When you're going around that corner, you can see that the outside wheel will travel at a greater distance than the inside wheel. And that differential has the responsibility to not only pass the power out to the rear wheels, but also to pass the power out to one of the outside wheel and let that inside wheel travel at a less without so much power, and allow it not to squeal. Otherwise that wheel would squeal. You'd burn rubber as you go around a corner. The problem with this type of differential in an off-highway situation is that when you get into the sand or soft materials, then the wheel with the least resistance is the one that spins. Therefore, if you park on the side of the road where half of your vehicle is on the road and the other half is in the sand, you may find yourself stuck. So the manufacturers, along with some other OEM type folks, got together and they developed something called a limited slip. A limited slip then will still allow you to go around a corner, but it also will allow the one wheel or both wheels to have some type of traction. The problem with the limited slip is it is just that, it's limited. They only work from either not working at all to a maximum capacity of about 30% of the power being transferred to both wheels. So then on came the lockers. There are locking differentials which are much more mechanical and much more positive. And there are basically three types of lockers at this point in time. There's a Detroit locker, an ARB locker, and a Lock-Right. The Lock-Right is just a matter of replacing the spider gears with a separate unit that locks up. An ARB air locker can be activated by a switch on your dash. And the Detroit locker, and I've got one here to show you exactly how it works. So when you go around a corner with a Detroit locker, one side will go free so that it'll turn like this does. But when you straighten out the vehicle and you step on the power, it locks in and both wheels are locked. So Detroit lockers is just one example of the three different types of locking differentials. Now there's something else that's important when you go around corners, and that is what they call wheel cheat. And you probably don't notice that much what wheel cheat is or what's termed wheel cheat when you're on the pavement because you have a lot of room. But when you're in a rocky section, where every wheel goes is very important, and how close your vehicle is to the rocks and cliffs and trees that you're trying to negotiate between is also important. So to illustrate that, we have a drawing to show you. The red line shows the path of the rear wheels. You can tell from the red lines that they're taking a different path, a shorter path, and this is what's been termed a wheel cheat. This becomes more important as you travel around corners, trees, rocks, over big rocks, around cliffs or hanging rocks. It becomes real important to know that the rear of your vehicle is going to travel a different distance, and actually it's going to cheat the corner. I always suggest that you learn how to drive your vehicle one wheel at a time. The left front wheel is the easiest one to drive because you can look out over the hood and you know about where that wheel is, and if you're still not sure, you can look out the window and see the left front tire. Once you've got that mastered, then look at the right front tire, because you can look across the hood and you can see where approximately that other tire is. Learn where that is, know when you're hitting a rock, when you need to drive onto a rock. The third wheel to learn how to understand and give yourself a better understanding of four-wheeling is to take a look at the left rear tire. You can look out the window and see that tire and know that it's cheating the corner and where that tire is at all time. The last wheel and the hardest wheel to understand where it's traveling is your right rear tire. So learn that one last. And if you don't believe that's the hardest one to learn how to drive, take a look at some of the four-wheel drive vehicles of the people that are hardcore four-wheelers, and you're going to find that that right rear tire or fender above that tire is the one that's damaged the most often, and you'll see it dented on more four-wheelers than not. So that pretty much concludes the two-wheel drive components, and I started moving into the four-wheel drive because I think that some of the basic stuff is the same for four-wheel drive. But in a four-wheel drive vehicle, the motor is connected to a transmission. The power then is transferred to a transfer case. From the transfer case, it runs out to the differentials on the front and also in the back. From there, it runs out to both the wheels. So now you have the front wheels pulling along with the rear wheels. The transfer case actually has two functions, and we can probably best see how this drivetrain is laid out by taking a look at the drivetrain inside an actual chassis of a vehicle without the body on it. In a four-wheel drive vehicle, the motor is directly connected to a transmission, and the transmission is directly connected to a transfer case. The transfer case has two functions. One is to split the power off to the front differential while still giving power to the rear differential. The second function of a transfer case is to give you a low range. Let's look at the transfer case a little closer. I already said that the transfer case divides the power out to the front axle as well as the rear axles, but let's also take a look at the other function of a transfer case, and that is to provide a low range. We have a diagram or chart here that'll best show you how that works. If you shift the transfer case into high range, two-wheel drive, that is no different than any other two-wheel drive vehicle. However, because you have a front axle pulling, you can also shift it into four-wheel drive. Now you have all four wheels, or at least both differentials and axles and wheels, getting power. The other option for a transfer case is to shift into low range. If you shift your transfer case into low range, then you can have four-wheel drive, low range. Now you have 3 speeds, or your transmission will shift through its 3 speeds, and your vehicle will not go any faster than probably 30 miles an hour. This provides your vehicle with much lower gears for going slower over that real rough terrain. In addition, it gives your vehicle additional power. In my Ford Explorer, the transfer case is shifted by simply pushing a button for four-wheel drive and a separate button for low range. In my Jeep, the transfer case is shifted with the lever. But regardless of the type of shifter, the results are the same. The last component of a four-wheel drive vehicle is disconnecting the front axle. You can disconnect the front axle with the transfer case by being in two-wheel drive, but the front wheels are still turning the axle, which is turning the differential, which is turning the front drive shaft. So you need some type of mechanism to disconnect that wheel from the differential. And there are two ways to do that. One way to do it is with some type of axle disconnect, and usually vacuum operated. You're just pushing the button on the dash, but actually it's disconnecting the axle from the front from your front wheels. Now the other way to do it is with some type of hub, and this is used on a lot of vehicles, older vehicles, and still used today. In fact, it's used on my vehicle. And this hub, you can turn this to be locking or freewheeling. So here it is in the lock position, and if you turn this dial, it'll go into the unlock position. This hub, being a locking type hub, will disconnect your front wheels from the axles themselves, and therefore nothing will turn on the front. So those are the two different types of front end disconnects. You either have an axle disconnect or you have some type of hub that you go out to the wheel and manually turn. Our next topic is tire pressure. It's very important to lower the pressure in your tires as soon as you leave the pavement. And this chart over here will show you exactly what I mean by lowering your air pressure in your tires. On one of the examples that are there, you can see what the tire imprint looks like when there's 40 pounds of air in it. And the same tire with only 15 pounds of air leaves a footprint about twice the size. That larger footprint gives you added traction in loose soils. It allows you to spin the tire less frequently, and overall makes the ride more comfortable. So when I start talking about tire pressure, I think you need to do one thing first. Read your owner's manual and take a hint from there. Some rules of thumb that I've developed is I generally run 15 to 18 pounds if I'm running in the dirt or rocks. If I'm going to travel in the sand, then I like to run between 10 and 12 pounds in order to give me a larger footprint, more flotation on the sand, and better traction. But you always have to pump up your tires when you reach pavement again, and also be concerned with the risk involved in low tire pressure. And there are two of them. First of all, with running lower tire pressure, you can pop a tire off the bead. In other words, you can push the tire right off the rim. And if you do that, you can cause yourself to lose control of your vehicle if you're traveling at any kind of speed or even on some kind of a side hill situation. The second risk that's involved is lack of control at high speeds. So if you are going to travel at high speeds, you're taking a big risk by running low tire pressure. And those are the two risks. Understand them when you're driving with low air pressure. Now the next subject that we want to get into is climbing hills. Now that you've understood the components of your vehicle, you've got your tire pressure adjusted down to the 15 to 18 pounds or whatever your owner manual might recommend for you, we're ready to climb some hills. First of all, shift your vehicle into four-wheel drive and low range. Check the departure angle. And by that I mean you want to drive up to the hill and make sure that when you start on a rolling start across a trail, that the front end is not going to hang up on the trail, on the hill before you start up. So check that departure angle. Anticipate what's on the other side of the hill that you're about ready to climb. Some hills are straight off on the other side, or it's very narrow, or the path may turn to the right or left. So make sure that you understand what's at the top of that hill. Then you want to scope out the hill for a back down. You know, we try to make every hill, but occasionally you do have to back down. So look at the hill. If there's an S-turn in the hill, you want to know at what point you're going to stop in this hill that you might prefer to be pulled over the top rather than backing down. Then when you're ready to climb the hill, keep the RPMs up, start at the hill, build your speed. Momentum is your friend. Momentum is what's going to carry you up over that hill. Back off the throttle once you get your wheels over the top. You know, you don't want to do wheel stands over the top. You don't want any risk of flipping back the other way on some hills that actually get that steep. Now let's watch some of our friends try that same hill. That was perfect. Just enough power to get the job done. Let's see how the CJ5 does. Oops, a little too much power. Ah, the CJ7 did it just right. Just enough power to get the job done. So So what happens if you don't make it over the top of the hill? You'll have to back down. So there's a few basic rules to follow when you're backing down. First of all, apply the brakes, steady the vehicle before you do anything. And then you're going to want to determine whether or not it might be better to have someone else pull you over the top of the hill rather than trying to back off the hill at all. Especially those hills that have S-turns in them. Trying to back down over those can be very difficult. So it may be safer for your vehicle and yourself to have someone pull you over the top. Just push aside your pride and get off that hill before somebody gets hurt. Keep the engine running. And now if you're going to back down, go ahead and shift it into reverse. Make sure that you're in low range. Look over your right shoulder and begin backing down that hill just like you would back out of your garage. If the vehicle starts to slide at all, in other words, if the front end starts to slide around on you, you're going to have to give it a little gas and go ahead and just steer out of it, and the vehicle should be able to come on down the hill safely and bring you guys back down so that you can start again. What goes up must come down, so that now that you've reached the top of the hill, you've got to drive back down that same route or some alternative, which might even be tougher than what you just climbed. So in order to go downhill, the first thing you want to do is make sure that you're in low range, four-wheel drive. Second thing you want to do is start off very, very slow. It's very easy to gain speed. So start off the top of that hill slow, use your brakes, and remember that that speed is easy to get. Go straight down if possible. And if the vehicle starts to slide at all, you feel the back end coming around, get off the brakes. That's the most difficult item to understand as a beginner when you're out there in the dirt. Everybody has a tendency to slam on the brakes if it starts to get away from them. Wrong thing to do in the dirt. A skidding front tire will not steer your vehicle. Always remember that. So get off those brakes, let the vehicle roll on out, and you'll be able to steer it onto safety and on down the hill. As long as we're talking about driving downhill, let's talk about driving on the side hill. Generally, I say stay away from side hills. You don't want to drive your vehicle on any kind of a side hill. That's where you can start risking a rollover. But if you do have to drive on the side of a hill, there's a couple basic suggestions I have for you. If the hill is rough and you're going to drive sideways, go very, very slow. It's that rocking motion that'll cause a vehicle to actually flip over. At the same time, if you're in very smooth surface, like in the sand dunes, and you're driving on the side of a hill, you want to go very fast. The speed will hold you down against the sand and allow you to travel side hills that you never thought were possible in your vehicle. But there's a couple risks along with side hilling. And the first one is that you can pop a tire off the bead. Because you are on the side of a hill and the weight of your vehicle is pushing on the rim, if you're running low air pressure, which is making your vehicle work better, it is possible to pop a tire off the bead. And that can cause your vehicle to lose control. So you want to be careful of that. And then the second thing you want to do if you do any side hilling, in fact, it's a general rule for four-wheeling at all, make sure the stuff in your vehicle is tied down, especially the heavy items. Because in an unfortunate incident where you might roll over, the stuff that's in your vehicle starts flying around and can hit you and can cause more damage than the rollover itself. Next subject, terrains. Rocks. Let's look at rocks first. When you drive over a rocky section, the best way to approach a rocky section is if you don't think you can clear a rock underneath the vehicle, put the tire on those larger rocks. That has the tendency to lift up your vehicle so that you can clear those rocks. And if you run over the rock, it's not going to hit underneath you. So drive on the rocks, go slow, use the whole road. You'll find yourself weaving back and forth in order to avoid damage to your vehicle. And you've got the whole road, why not use it all? Start and stop in gear if you have a stick shift. That saves on your clutch, also makes it easier to get going after you've stopped, keeps you from slipping the clutch. Use low range and four-wheel drive. And if you're not sure where you're at or you're having trouble getting over a spot, ask for a spotter, someone to get out in front of you and tell you which way to move your tires and wheels. Or get out and check yourself. There's nothing wrong with getting out of your vehicle. I do it a lot of times, and check underneath it to see what's there. And then if you find yourself hanging up in a certain spot, back up, put some rocks in the hole so when you drive over that spot, it'll lift your vehicle up and you'll clear it. The next type of terrain that you'll find yourself in is sand. You can find this in sandy washes or sand dunes or just a sandy stretch along the desert. There you want to find yourself lowering the air pressure a little bit lower, gives you a little more traction. Keep the engine RPMs high. You can also use a technique called wheel walking. When your vehicle starts to lose traction either in the sand or if you're in the dirt, you're climbing a hill and you're losing the traction, there's two things you can do. You can try wheel walking, which is turning the wheel back and forth. This gives the tires a chance to try to grab new material, get yourself new traction, and pull the vehicle on up the hill. And this can work in the sand, mud, or the dirt. The other thing you want to do is slow down. When you're in the sand, if you find yourself losing traction, you can let off the throttle a little bit. Slow the wheel spin down. A slower wheel spin will equal more traction, so you can back off. If you find yourself tipping in the sand, head downhill, turn downhill, get off that hill and turn yourself downhill. Horsepower always helps in the sand. For ruts, those are V-ditches, also called V-ditches. But for those ruts, what you want to do there is try to straddle them if you can. Get a wheel on either side of the rut and travel across them. But if you have to cross a rut, always cross a rut at an angle. Come at it at some type of an angle. Try a 45-degree angle if there's enough room to do so. And then in the mud. In the mud, I have a general rule. I stay out of it because I don't like to clean up my vehicle after I'm in the mud. But if you do find yourself getting into a muddy situation, remember that the tire tread makes a big difference. There are mud terrain tires, and they do work better. Lower your air pressure. Again, the lower air pressure gives you a better footprint and better traction. Spinning the tire also cleans the mud out of the tire, so sometimes you need to spin it fast to clean the tread so that you can get new bite. Don't get your recovery vehicle stuck. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a vehicle stuck in the mud. The next guy drives out to pull him out, parks, walks over, hooks him up, comes back and finds his own vehicle sunk down and stuck. So use longer rope, hook your tow straps together and get out, but don't get that recovery vehicle stuck whatever you do. Another type of terrain that you can find yourself driving in is snow and ice. In the snow or ice, you may want to lower your air pressure. Lower air pressure, again, gives you that larger footprint. You can use chains. If you do use chains, what I found to work best is in the ice, put those chains on the front so that it steers better. If you're going to use chains in the snow, put them on the rear of the vehicle. Avoid sudden changes in the speed. And always test how slick the surface is by lightly applying the brakes so that you know what kind of surface you're driving on. And if the vehicle starts to slide sideways, you want to turn into the same direction of the slide, get off the brakes, and give it a little throttle to steer yourself out. One other thing I can suggest is that chains do work good on all 4 tires, and that's the best way to go. in section 2 now, we're going to cover guidelines to four-wheeling, getting yourself unstuck, basic winching, trail repairs. If you're lost or stranded, what do you do? What to carry in your four-wheel drive vehicle, and upgrading your four-wheel drive, and trail ethics. The first guideline is don't drink and drive. Avoid digging your vehicle down into the frame. By that I mean that once your vehicle is not going to move any further, if you stay on the gas, then the vehicle starts sinking down, and pretty soon it's resting on the frame and all your wheels are turning, and then you really are stuck. Follow people with more experience than you have. Watch which way they go. Watch how they use the whole road in front of them. Watch how they put their wheels on the rocks. So follow somebody that has more experience. Don't be afraid to get out and check underneath the vehicle. A lot of times you kind of forget where you were on the trail, so you need to stop and get out and look. Or if you're hanging up on a rock somewhere, you may need to get out and take a look. Don't follow too close. The person in front of you may get hung up or stop quickly, and you can run into the back of them. Also, you need a lot more room to see underneath their vehicle so that you can see what they see, and you'll get a better understanding of how to drive your vehicle. Know the ground clearance of your vehicle. Know where the pumpkins are. The differentials. In the front, a lot of times the differential is offset to one side, and the rear differential is in the center. So that, therefore, the most clearance that you have will be along, let's say, the left-hand side of the vehicle, just inside the tire. Know where that clearance is and use it to your advantage. Use the least amount of throttle to get the job done. Never overpower your vehicle. A spinning tire gets no traction. Test your four-wheel drive at home, and you can do that by simply driving up against a curb, putting your vehicle in four-wheel drive, and your vehicle should pull itself right up on that curb. If it doesn't, there's something wrong, and if you haven't used it in a long time, it could be something as simple as a vacuum line. So do check it before you leave on a long trip. Avoid wheel hopping. Wheel hopping is when the wheel starts spinning and it starts jumping, and you'll feel it. The whole vehicle kind of goes, and when it does that, you are causing incredible stress on your drivetrain, and that's where parts are broken. Engage your four-wheel drive before you need it. You may find that once you're stuck, you put it in four-wheel drive and you need to roll 10 feet, and you can't roll 10 feet. So always engage it first. Try to keep the wheels on the ground. Look for a path through the ruts that will keep your wheels on the ground. Tell somebody where you're going. Let people know. And lower your tire pressure and use the guidelines. The rule of thumb for rocks and dirt is 15 to 18 pounds, and in the sand I use 10 to 12 pounds. Always check with your owner's manual and follow that. Pump up your tires when you get back to the pavement. Now let's give you a technique for crossing water. Cross at all designated water crossings. Don't try to create your own crossing across water. Know where your engine intake is, because that's what's going to suck water in and ruin your engine if you got into too deep of water. So know where the engine intake is located. Know the water's depth. If you're not sure, get out and wade across. Be sure, use a stick, but be sure you know how deep that water is. Always head at an angle and upstream in case the water tends to lose traction. The vehicle starts to kind of float on you if you're in that deep of water. So head across the stream and angle yourself up the stream. Use low range and four-wheel drive. Go slow. Make sure that there's no bow waves. A bow wave is that water that's pushing in front of your vehicle. And if you go faster, that water will come in up over your hood and into the engine itself. After any kind of a deep water crossing, you may want to go back and check your transfer case oil and transmission oils, because sometimes they'll end up sucking in the water and you'll end up with a milky kind of oil instead of the actual oil to keep your friction-free differentials running properly. The other thing I could say about salt water is try to stay out of it. And if you do get into salt water at all, you'll need to go and rinse off your vehicle as quickly as possible, because it just turns everything that's not painted into rust. So the bottom line, I think I can say, is stay away from deep water, enjoy yourself in the shallow water crossings. So those are some of the basic guidelines that I would suggest that you follow. And now let's take a look at what happens when you get stuck. If you're in low range, if you're not in low range, you want to make sure that you are in low range and four-wheel drive. I can't tell you how many people have been stuck and you walk over and put it in four-wheel drive and drive them right out of the problem that they're in. Know what you're up against. Mud is the most difficult situation to have yourself stuck in because the mud kind of sucks in the vehicle. In the case of mud, you may have to use several vehicles to get you out or use a winch. The next one is sand, because the sand will seep in around the tire. The next one is rocks. If you're just hung up on a rock, a short little yank backwards or even a push by several of the people that are on your trip can push you off of a rock. And in the snow, same thing. A few people pushing on your vehicle can push you right out of a place that you might be stuck in. Remember that wheel walking technique I talked about moving the wheel back and forth to grab traction. That also will help you pull. Lower your air pressure. Go down lower. You know, get that tire down lower where it'll get more bite. That also will help you. And always go back downhill or back out from which you came. In other words, if you're heading into an area and you get stuck and you're trying to get out, go back the same way you got stuck. It's always easier to try to go back and also try to make yourself go downhill wherever possible. Dig the dirt and sand and mud away from the tires and differential. You may find that a differential's hanging up, and if you can dig the dirt away from it, your vehicle can get traction and pull you on through. And don't use a strap with a hook. The straps with those hooks that are molded into the end of them can end up being flying projectiles. Always use a strap that just has an eyelet sewn into it. They're 20,000 pounds for maximum strength, or you can use a 4-inch strap. Try jacking the vehicle up and placing rocks underneath the tires, dirt, logs, or whatever you might be able to find. A lot of times you'll find that just getting the vehicle raised up a little bit or pushing the traction onto the other wheels can help yourself pull yourself out. And if you're still stuck, then you'll want to go to winching or have someone else pull you out. In fact, that's a good reason that you travel with buddy vehicles. A couple of suggestions for winching when you're pulling yourself. First of all, if you're going to use a tree as an anchor point, make sure that you use a tree saver, a blanket, or a strap. Wrap that strap around the tree and then connect your cable to that using a solid anchor point. Or sometimes you find yourself using the strap to wrap around rock, a huge rock or something to strap to. The next suggestion for pulling yourself is use the vehicle power itself. Go ahead and slip the clutch if you have to, or just if you have an automatic, just apply a little throttle and let the vehicle itself pull along at the same time the winch is pulling. That eases the winch pressure and gets you up the hill a lot faster than it would otherwise. The next thing to do is always make sure that the pulls are straight. If you can. You want that pull to be straight off that vehicle's bumper and straight on to whatever your anchor point is. And remember that if you need more power than your winch is providing and you're already trying to use the wheels and it still won't work because you're using your own power, then double the winch. You can take the pulley, with the pulley you can take the cable out to your anchor point, through the pulley and back to your own vehicle, and that doubles the power of the winch. If you have an 8,000-pound winch, you now have a 16,000-pound winch. Just be careful, though, that you don't go any less than 5 wraps on the drum because now you're using a lot of cable. The third point to remember is that you can also, when you're doubling the power of your winch, you can connect to some other object. It could either be a rock or a tree or another vehicle. And if you do connect to another object, what you are doing is not only doubling the power of the winch, you're going to 16,000 pounds, but you are also splitting the load. You're putting 8,000 pounds on your vehicle and 8,000 pounds on somebody else's vehicle or in another direction. And that may save on whatever you're trying to, your bumper, and if you've got a real heavy pull, it's always a good idea to try to split that load off if you can. Now here's a few safety tips. Use only solid anchor points. The square tube of a hitch works well. You insert a strap into the square tube and slip the pin through the end of the loop. Put a blanket over the cable. If the cable comes loose, the blanket will absorb some of the energy. Remember, most accidents happen at the fairlead, so keep your hands and fingers a safe distance away. Whomever is operating the winch is in charge. It becomes their responsibility to keep spectators back. Always wear gloves when handling the cable. So that's winching. Now let's look at trail repairs. The first suggestion I have for a trail repair, use your cellular phone. I mean, if you're stuck and you have no other way to get out, a lot of people today have cellular phones and cells reach pretty far out there. But if the cellular phone doesn't work, then you may start taking a look at what you want to carry in your vehicle, and I have some suggestions for that in a second. Also, you want to remember this, that you want to work on your vehicle in your driveway at home with the same tools that you carry in your vehicle. By doing that, what you find is, oh, I'm missing this tool, or I wish I had this kind of screwdriver, or I need this special socket. Well, what I find myself doing is gathering up those tools and throwing them in my toolbox. And the other thing to remember is that even if you're not mechanical, you want to bring any of those special tools or things that you find out about your vehicle that are special, because there are other people on the trail and they can help you if you have the tools to work on your own vehicle. Travel with the same kind of vehicles. If you're traveling, if you're with Cherokees and you travel with Cherokees, then just think of all those spare parts that are coming along with you. Or if you're in Ford Explorers, try to find somebody else that has a Ford Explorer to travel with you. Remember this too, that you can steal from other parts of your own vehicle. If you need a real flat washer with a small hole in it, look around on your vehicle. You may find that same part somewhere else that's not as critical as the point that you're trying to repair or that's got you broken. Bring a few extra parts, and at each stop along the way, that get out of your vehicle and look underneath. Look for anything that might hanging or dripping, because those are indications that you have a problem, and it's better to catch it early in the game. So at every stop I always look underneath my vehicle. If you're unable to get your vehicle repaired once it's broken down, then you may find yourself stranded in the backcountry. The other thing that can happen to you is you could be lost. You can lose your way, lose direction, it could get dark on you. So you may find yourself either lost or stranded. And if you find yourself in this situation, the first thing you want to do is go into a survival mode, and the second thing you want to do is make a plan. When you're in survival mode, the first thing you want to do is ration the food that you have and water. Make sure that you stretch it as long as you can. Stay with your vehicle. Use your CB radio. In the CB radio, you want to look at Channel 9 for emergency channels. The Bureau of Land Management does monitor Channel 9, at least in California, and they do in other states. There's also REACT folks, those are amateur radio operators that monitor Channel 9 for just such an emergency. If you can't raise anybody on Channel 9, go to Channel 19. Channel 19 is the most common trucker channel there is, so you may be able to get a hold of a truck driver who then could radio your needs onto somebody who could come and rescue you. Don't travel at night, and the only exception to that would be in the desert if you knew where you were going. But other than that, don't travel at night. In the second item that I mentioned, which was making a plan, study the map. Remember where you've been. Take a look at some of the landmarks. Try to remember the landmarks on the maps. Try to remember where you've been, landmarks you saw, and try to get some idea how far in you are. And retrace the steps. It's always better to go back the way you came rather than continuing on. Vehicle preparation and what to carry. Once you've decided on taking a trip off highway, then the first thing you need to do is to check your vehicle over and make sure that it'll make it. And that means you go through and you check your engine oil, hoses, fan belt, engine transmission fluid, brake fluid, check the water and fluid levels that you have in the water in both your windshield washer. Make sure that under the hood is solid and sound. The next thing to do is walk around your vehicle and check the tire wear. Make sure that the air pressure in your tires is sufficient. And then check your seat belts. Make sure that the seat belts are all functional and you have a seat belt for everyone in the vehicle. Once your vehicle is checked out, the next thing to do is take a look at what you should carry in your vehicle. On any trip that you take off the highway, there are basic items that you should carry with you. On this table I have here every item that you should carry on every trip, anytime that you leave the pavement. So let's start over here with the strap. I have a strap that I've carried for years. You want the loops on the end. That will ensure that you can connect to something solid and pull yourself out or pull somebody else. I have a Max Axe tool here, which has an axe, a shovel. It has a McLeod with it as well, a rake. So this pretty much takes care of any digging that I need to do. You've got a basic toolbox with the basic wrenches in it. Across the back here, I also have an air pump. This is a DC air pump. It just plugs into your cigarette lighter. The Quick Air is a dual cylinder type, so it pumps plenty of air for pumping up tires. I also carry maps. I have here a set of Sidekick maps, but you'll have county maps or any other maps to tell you where you're going and make sure that you can keep on track. Flashlights. I like to carry two types of flashlights. I carry just a regular mag light flashlight here, and then also this head flashlight. This has got a band for it, and you put it around your head and it just turns on. Both of these flashlights take AA batteries, and here's some extra batteries for my flashlight. Then what I have is a fire extinguisher. On a fire extinguisher, you want to make sure that the needle is in the green, because if you ever need a fire extinguisher, you sure want it to work for you. Next thing is some duct tape. I can't go anywhere without some duct tape. This is real useful for a lot of different places. Oil, 1 quart of engine oil. Some mosquito repellent. This is nice to have here in the Sierras. Suntan lotion. In fact, I got the block there, the number 30. Also, I like to carry the suntan lotion that stays in water. That works pretty good. And then for some personal items, I have some saline solution. I wear contact lenses, so I always carry saline solution to help rinse out my eyes. And also, I usually carry an extra pair of glasses with me. Down in the front row here, we have the valve, the little torch head that we can put onto any propane bottle that works on your stove. Those little stove propane bottles, this thing just screws right onto the top, and then you have a heating element for heating things up or soldering something. Bars leak for radiator sealant. Then I have a tire repair kit. This is the best kit, I believe. It's the type that have a rope that you push into the hole, and also has the rubber cement that comes with it. So these are the best. Once I use this one time, I just throw away the rest of it and buy a brand new kit. You need some kind of a tire pressure gauge, which I have here. Make sure you've got one of those with you when you start lowering your air pressure. And then a first aid kit. You can see this first aid kit is stuffed with a lot of stuff. When I bought the first aid kit originally, I dumped everything out and went through it and added the items in it that I thought should be there that weren't. And if there was something in there I didn't understand, if I still had room for it, I left it. If I didn't, I took it out. So the first aid kit is something that I can use and I can depend on. Next thing is jumper cables. Here I have a set of jumper cables. That's handy for jump starting your vehicle or another one. And then down on the end here, I have a bottle jack, what they call a hydraulic bottle jack. And these jacks are real handy for jacking a wheel up and putting a rock underneath it, or even to repair something. We've used them to jack frames back together in order to repair them. But down here on the very end, I have the most important 2 items that you should carry on every trip, and that's some type of a CB radio. Even though I have one in my vehicle hardwired, I also carry this one. And if you don't have one hardwired, then you need to get some type of a portable like this. This is a Midlands Ready Rescue. The reason I like this one, it also has a switch on it to work this radio on weather bands, so I can also pick up the weather stations. It has a magnetic antenna, or it can be worked off the batteries. And again, these are AA batteries, which I carry extra batteries of. The second item that you should always carry is water. I happen to like these Gatorade bottles. The Gatorade bottles have real tight fitting caps on them. So once you're done with the Gatorade, you can just refill it with water, and it lasts quite a while inside these bottles. Or you can buy the bottled waters that have a shelf life of 18 months and carry those with you. Next, I'd like to address the subject of upgrading your vehicle. A lot of us buy our new vehicles and then we take them out and we wonder what we should do to them. What should be the first thing that we do to make the vehicle work better? Well, tires. You want to try to get between 31 and 33-inch tires on your vehicle. And the wider the better. All-terrain tires and mud-terrain tires work the best. You know, try to stay away from the street-only treads. And every manufacturer produces some type of all-terrain tire. Suspension kits. I always suggest that you raise your vehicle only as high as necessary to clear the tires that you want to put on there. So only lift it as high as you need to go to get those 31s or 33-inch tires underneath your vehicle. Body lift kits, my suggestion is not to use them. The body lift kits are spacers in between the frame and the body. And what happens then is the body tends to rock back and forth and you start cracking the body at each of those points where it's bolted on. And again, I'm talking about a lot of use. It's not going to break in the first 6 months, but after 5 years of good use, I think you'll find cracks in those areas. As far as rims go, there's really two thoughts on the rims. Again, you may be limited by the type of vehicle you're driving, but they're basically 8-inch rims and 10-inch rims. If you use a narrower rim like an 8-inch rim, that'll pull the tire in more toward the center of the wheel and protect the edges of the rim. But you do that at the expense of losing flotation that your 10-inch rims give you, because the wider rim has a tendency to spread the tire out a little wider and give you a little more traction. And I happen to use 10-inch rims on my vehicle because they fit. The last item is a winch. If you want to upgrade your vehicle and you'd like to add a winch, always buy an 8,000-pound winch or more. My choice is a 10,000-pound Warren, and the reason I chose that is because the take-up speed is 35 feet a minute when it's unloaded. And whenever I pull the cable out, I always like to take the time to wind it back up, so it's the quickest wind-up speed. But it's also a very big winch, and it's heavy. And if it doesn't fit on your vehicle, you know, they make a 9,000-pound or an 8,000-pound, so the choice is yours. Always buy the accessory kit. The accessory kit that comes with the winch manufacturer puts together for you has all the items in it that you'll need when you actually get ready to use your winch. Our final topic is trail ethics. Be environmentally conscious. Travel on designated routes only. Respect the rights of others. Educate yourself to the rules and regulations. Avoid sensitive areas and wildlife. And drive responsibly. That's the tread and tread lightly. Also, stop on the side of the road if you need to stop to take a picture or you break down. And the final suggestion I have for you under the ethics category is if you pack it in, pack it out. My basics video wouldn't be complete without talking to the professor of four-wheeling, Harry Llewellyn. Harry's coined the phrase wheel cheat and diagonal teeter-totter, and in order to catch up with Harry, we're going to have to travel to the California desert. So let's go see if we can find Harry. Hi, Harry.
How you doing, Rick?
Oh, fine.
Good to see you.
Say, Harry, you know that I'm putting together this four-wheeling basics video, and you've been around new folks getting started in four-wheeling for a lot of years. What is the single best advice that you could give to a new four-wheeler?
It's to take care of yourself. Most of us think in terms of vehicles.
Yeah, we do.
Winches and tires and gas tanks and things like that. What we neglect is ourselves. One, we should always carry water.
Yeah.
You know what happens in this environment if you don't have water.
Yeah, I need a lot of water out here.
Two, you want to tell somebody where you're going and when you're going to return. They know where to look.
That's true.
Yeah. And then three, you want to make sure you always use the buddy system. Travel with other people. I don't care how good a driver you are, navigator, mechanic, what you carry for spares, that second car is like 100% spares.
Hey, that's true.
And you know, from there, the list gets as long as your arm, and we're both still learning.
Yeah, we are. I'm always adding stuff to my list.
Yeah.
Well, Harry, I really appreciate you coming out and spending some time, and,
Right.
and that's solid advice for anybody that's getting started in four-wheeling. And so now it's time to get back to the Hummer test track and get that ride in that Hummer that they promised me.
All right, have a
Harry,
good ride.
see ya.